Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This incident occurred several years ago when I was employed as a construction project manager for a company that provided services for retail point-of-sale systems. My responsibilities ranged from adding or removing a register to installing all the electronics in newly constructed stores. One year, I decided to take a camping and off-road vacation in a remote area where I was supposed to meet some friends. However, they called to inform me that they would be about 6 hours late. Since I had recently completed IT remodeling for the local grocery store, I decided to walk over and say hello to some people I knew there. When I arrived, I discovered that half of their front-end registers were down. The manager asked if I could assist, and since I was just passing the time, I agreed, provided my boss approved the overtime. Anyone who worked in the field was paid hourly. The overtime was approved, and it quickly became apparent that the issue stemmed from the cleaning contractor dismantling registers the night before to make cleaning easier, which violated their contract. I managed to repair all but 2 lanes, which had damaged power and data cables. I informed the manager that I could fix them using parts from the local hardware store and electronics shop if he would reimburse me. I also requested permission to park my truck in a vendor-only spot, as the parking lot was full and I needed tools that I carried in my truck. He agreed, so I retrieved my truck, picked up the necessary items, and parked in the vendor spot. This detail becomes important later. Both registers required the cabinets to be dismantled in order to replace the damaged cables. I repaired the first lane and got it operational. I then moved on to the second lane, which was situated right in front of the customer service desk. I ensured that the closed sign was displayed and used a 6-wheeled cart loaded with a special order to plug the register. While lying under the register belt to connect the new cables to the register base, someone kicked me. After being kicked a second time, I instinctively lashed out with my steel-toed boot, striking a woman who I will refer to as Karen in the knee. She screamed and was briefly knocked unconscious when she hit her head on a cart she had moved. It turns out that Karen decided my lane should be open. She moved the cart, tossed the closed sign on the floor, and kicked me for ignoring her. What she failed to notice was that a local police officer was at the customer service desk, inquiring if the store wanted the lifted truck and the vendor spot ticketed. The manager was directing him to where I was to see if the truck belonged to me, and both of them witnessed Karen kicking me. The officer called an ambulance for Karen and then asked if I wanted to press charges, which I did. The store also pressed charges as she had been banned and was violating a no trespass order. Karen later pleaded guilty to the trespassing and a misdemeanor assault charge after being informed that a police officer had witnessed the attack and that it had been recorded by security cameras. My employer's legal team informed me that I was being subpoenaed for a deposition because Karen was suing both companies for compensation, claiming that I had broken her kneecap and given her a concussion. However, a week later, I was notified that the deposition was cancelled because a judge had dismissed the case with prejudice due to Karen having initiated the violence, as documented in the police report. I've lived in this house for over 20 years and it's been my sanctuary. I bought it when I was just starting out in my career. It was a fixer-upper, but I saw the potential. Over the years, I poured my heart and soul into renovating it, turning it into my dream home. The crown jewel of my property was a pool I installed about 15 years ago. It wasn't just a pool, it was my oasis. After long days of coding and dealing with office politics, there was nothing better than coming home and taking a refreshing dip. It was my escape, my little piece of paradise. Everything was perfect until about 2 years ago when our neighborhood decided to form a homeowners association. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured it would help maintain property values and keep the neighborhood looking nice. Problems started almost immediately. A newly elected HOA president, who I will call Karen, took an instant dislike to my pool. She claimed it was unauthorized and that I needed written permission from the HOA to have it. I tried explaining that my pool predated the HOA by over a decade, but she wouldn't listen. That's when the fines started. At first, They were small, $50 here, $1 there, but they quickly escalated. I say, look, I've had this pool for 15 years. The HOA didn't even exist when I built it. How can you fine me for something that was here before you? Rules are rules. If you want to keep your pool, you need to apply for permission like everyone else. But that doesn't make any sense. You can't retroactively apply rules to pre-existing structures. I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. Pay the fines or remove the pool. I refused to pay. It was a principle of the thing. I wasn't going to be bullied into submission by some power-hungry HOA president. The fines kept piling up, but I stood my ground. Then about a month ago, I had to leave for a work trip. My company was launching a new product, and as a lead developer, I needed to oversee the rollout. It was a stressful couple of weeks, filled with long days and sleepless nights. When I finally returned home exhausted and looking forward to relaxing by my pool, I couldn't believe my eyes. Where my beautiful oasis once stood was now just a dirt-filled hole. I was in shock. As I stood there trying to process what I was seeing, Karen sauntered up with a smug look on her face. "Oh, you're back. As you can see, we've taken care of your little problem for you. What have you done? You had no right to do this." "We had every right. You refused to pay the fines or remove the pool yourself, so the HOA board voted to remove it for you. The cost will be added to your outstanding fines, of course." I was livid. This woman and her minions had destroyed my property while I was away. They had no legal right to do so, and I was going to make sure they paid for it. I immediately called a lawyer. When I explained the situation, he was almost as angry as I was. This is a clear case of trespassing and destruction of property. The HOA had no authority to remove a structure that predated their formation. We're going to sue them for everything they've got. And so we did. We filed a lawsuit against the HOA and Karen personally for trespassing, destruction of property, and emotional distress. The case was airtight. Not only did we have photographic evidence of the pool's existence predating the HOA, but we also had testimonies from long-time neighbors confirming how long the pool had been there. The court proceedings were intense. Karen tried to justify her actions, claiming she was just enforcing the rules, but the judge wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Karen, can you explain to me how you thought it was within your authority to destroy a structure that clearly predated your HOA formation?" "Your Honor, the rules clearly state that all pools must have written permission from the HOA. And did it not occur to you that rules created in 2022 cannot be retroactively applied to a pool built in 2008? But the rules?" The judge's verdict was swift and satisfying. The HOA was ordered to pay for the full restoration of my pool, plus damages for emotional distress. Karen was removed from her position as HOA president and barred from serving on any HOA board in the future. In the end, the HOA was dissolved. The neighborhood decided we were better off without it. And last I heard, Karen was trying to sell her house. Apparently, she couldn't handle living in a neighborhood where she couldn't boss everyone around. My partner and I have been planning this road trip for a month. We both needed a break from our hectic city lives. Me with my non-stop job as an environmental lawyer, and them with their demanding role as a school teacher. We decided to take a week off and drive up the coast, just enjoying the scenery and each other's company. We've been on a road for about 3 hours when we decided to make a pit stop. You know how it goes. Stretch the legs, use a bathroom, grab some snacks. We pulled into this little rest area of the highway. It wasn't anything fancy, just a parking lot with a convenience store and some vending machines. As we were walking back to our car, drinks and snacks in hand, we noticed this group of people near the trash bins. There were 2 couples, clearly the parents, another adult who looked like he might be an uncle or family friend, and 3 kids who were about 8 years old. Now, I'm not one to judge other people's parenting, but what I saw next really got under my skin. These kids were just chucking their trash on the ground, right next to the bin. And I mean a lot of trash. Empty chip bags, soda cans, candy wrappers, you name it. The worst part? The adults were just standing there watching it happen like it was no big deal. I looked at my partner and I could tell they were as bothered by this as I was. I mean, come on. We're both in jobs where we try to make the world a little better every day. Seeing this blatant disregard for the environment and basic decency was like a punch to the gut. I decided I couldn't just stand by and watch. I walked over to the kids, trying to keep my tone light and friendly. Hey guys, let's put that stuff in the bin, shall we? I made sure my voice suggested I'd help them do it. I wasn't trying to scold them or anything, just encourage them to do the right thing. But before the kids could respond, one of the mothers, let's call her Karen, because well, you'll see why, stepped in. Don't tell my kids what to do. I was taken aback by her hostile tone, but I tried to keep things civil. Okay, perhaps you can help them clean up after themselves then. Nah. And just like that, they all piled into this massive SUV, and as they drove off, the kids actually waved at us like this was all some kind of joke. My partner and I were stunned. We stood there for a moment, just processing what had happened. Can you believe that? Partner asks me. I know. What kind of example are they setting for those kids? We got back in our car and hit the road again, but we couldn't stop talking about it. A blatant disregard for the environment, the entitlement, the terrible parenting. It was all just so frustrating. Partner says, you'd think they would at least pretend to care about littering in front of their kids, right? It's not just about the trash, it's about teaching kids to respect public spaces and the environment. We went back and forth like this for about 10 minutes, trying to make sense of what we just witnessed. That's when we saw it. A police car with its lights flashing, pulled over on the side of the road, and right in front of it was that same massive SUV. As we drove past, we could see all the adults from earlier standing outside the car. They looked pretty uncomfortable as the officer was clearly giving them a stern talking to. My partner and I exchanged looks, both of us trying and failing to hide our grins. No way. You don't think so? Karma, baby. We couldn't hear what was being said, of course, but it was clear the officer wasn't happy. I could just imagine him asking why there was so much litter around their car, or maybe someone had reported their littering at the rest stop. As we continued our trip, we thought maybe somewhere down the road those kids will remember the day their parents got pulled over and think twice before tossing their trash on the ground. I've been flying planes for over a decade now. Let me tell you, it's not always as glamorous as people think. Sure, the views are incredible and there is nothing quite like soaring through the clouds, but the job comes with its fair share of challenges. Long hours, jet lag, and dealing with all sorts of people can really wear you down. This particular day, I was finishing up a 4-day trip that had taken me across the country and back. I was exhausted, my body clock was all messed up, and all I wanted was to get home to my own bed. My last flight landed around noon, and I had a couple of hours to kill before my connecting flight home. As soon as we touched down, I headed to the crew lounge to change out of my uniform. I always do this when I'm deadheading. That's what we call it when we're flying as passengers for work. It's nice to blend in with the crowd and not have people constantly asking me questions about the flight or the weather. With my uniform tucked away, my bag and my work ID hanging around my neck, I made my way to the gate for my flight home. I found a seat and settled in, pulling out my tablet to catch up on some reading. And that's when I first noticed the noise. Behind me, a little girl was treating the airport seats like her professional jungle gym. She was climbing over them, under them, and generally making a racket. Now, I am not one to complain about kids being kids, but this was something else. The worst part was a random screaming. It was like nails on a chalkboard, but I tried to tune it out and focus on my tablet. I must have zoned out for a bit because the next thing I knew, there was a full-blown scream right in my ear. I turned my head and there she was. This little girl hanging off the back of my chair, her face just inches from me. Without thinking, I snapped at her. Don't scream into my ear. That's when all hell broke loose. This woman, who I can only assume was a girl's mother, came charging over like a bull seeing red. Don't you yell at my kid. How dare you? This little girl looked shocked and actually went quiet, but her mother was just getting started. She stood over the seat behind me, practically frothing at the mouth. Who do you think you are? You can't talk to children like that. I should report you to security. I just stared at her for a few seconds, trying to process what was happening. Then I decided the best course of action was to ignore her. I turned back to my tablet, but she wasn't having it. Hey, I am talking to you. Don't you ignore me. She kept going on and on, trying to get a rise out of me. At one point, she even tried to get her daughter to start screaming again. Sweetie, you can scream if you want to. Don't let this mean man stop you from having fun. But the kid, bless her heart, just sat there quietly. I guess she had more sense than her mother. This went on for what felt like an eternity but was probably only about 10 minutes. The woman was getting more and more worked up to the point where I thought she might actually try to hit me. Just as I was considering calling for help, a man who seemed to be with them finally stepped in. Come on, honey, let's go sit somewhere else. He gathered up their things and led the woman and the little girl away. I could still hear her ranting as they walked off. You know, I actually had some wings in my bag that we give out to kids on flights sometimes. I thought about giving them to her as a peace offering. After that display from her mother, I decided it wasn't worth the risk. I sat there for a while trying to process what had just happened. And that's when I noticed a couple of airport security officers walking towards me. Great, I thought. She actually went and reported me. Excuse me, sir. We received a complaint about a disturbance in this area. Can you tell us what happened? I explained the situation as calmly as I could, showing them my airline ID and mentioning that I was just trying to get home after a long trip. I admit I shouldn't have yelled at the child, but I was startled by the scream in my ear. I didn't mean any harm. The officers nodded understandingly. We understand, sir. Actually, several other passengers came to us with complaints about that woman's behavior. We're going to have a talk with her about appropriate conduct in the airport. It was nice to know that others had seen what happened and backed me up. Security officer asks, "Is there anything else you need from us?" "No, thank you. I appreciate you checking in." As they walked away, I heard the overhead speaker announce that my flight was boarding. Perfect timing. I gathered my things and headed to the gate, ready to put this whole incident behind me. As I boarded the plane, I caught sight of the woman and her family a few rows ahead of me. She was still fuming, complaining loudly to anyone who would listen. Sometimes karma has a way of working things out on its own. I've always been a planner. I learned early on that organization was key to maintaining my sanity. It's probably why I became an event coordinator. There is something deeply satisfying about watching all the pieces fall into place after months of careful preparation. So when my family decided on a spontaneous trip to the lake, I was determined to make it as smooth as possible. My sister, bless her heart, suggested taking the bus, but with the scorching sun and ongoing construction, I knew that wasn't the best option. That's when I remembered the ride-hailing app that had been gaining popularity in our city. I'd heard good things about it: cleaner cars, friendlier drivers, and the works. It seemed like the perfect solution. Little did I know I was about to encounter one of those drivers who gives a whole service a bad name. Here's how it all went down. I say, "Alright everyone, I've ordered a car. It should be here in about 6 minutes. My son says, "Cool. Can I watch the progress on your phone, Mom?" "Sure, honey. Just don't drop it, okay?" We settled in to wait, chatting about our plans for the day. My husband and sister were discussing the best spots for picnicking when my son piped up, "Mom, why is the car going the wrong way?" I frowned, taking the phone back to check. Sure enough, our drivers seemed to be heading in the opposite direction. Huh? Maybe there's some construction he's trying to avoid? Let's give him a few minutes. We went back to our conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A couple of minutes later, I checked again. Me muttering, "Now he's circling a kindergarten? What on earth?" Husband says, "Everything okay, honey?" I'm not sure. The driver seems to be taking a very scenic route. Maybe he's new to the area. I wanted to believe that, but as the minutes ticked by and our driver continued to meander around the city, my suspicions grew. When he passed a crossing that would have led straight to us and instead headed towards the train station, I knew what was happening. Me, frustrated, he's trying to get us to cancel the ride. What? Why would he do that? Some drivers do this to collect a cancellation fee without actually doing the work. I can't believe this is happening. I decided to give the driver one last chance. I sent him a message. "Hi there. I noticed you seem to be having trouble finding us. If it's easier, feel free to cancel the ride so another driver can pick us up." No response. Instead, he headed towards a hardware store on the outskirts of town. Me fuming. That's it. I am not letting him get away with this. I filed a complaint with the app, complete with screenshots of his ridiculous route. My husband, seeing how upset I was, took out his own phone. Husband says, I am ordering another car. We're not wasting our day because of this guy. While we waited for our new ride, I kept an eye on our original driver's progress. He continued his meandering path through the city, clearly hoping I'd give up and cancel. Me, determined, oh nobody, who can play this game. After what felt like an eternity but was actually about 16 minutes, the driver finally cancelled the ride himself. Me triumphantly, ha, wasted his own time trying to scam us. Our new driver arrived moments later, a friendly woman who apologized for her colleague's behavior. I am so sorry I had to deal with that. Some of the old taxi drivers think they can get away with their old tricks here. I hope this doesn't put you off using the service in the future. Don't worry, it won't. I'm just glad we didn't have to pay that cancellation fee. We settled into the car, heading towards our lake day. Sure, our day had gotten off to a rocky start, but in the end, the would-be scammer had only cheated himself out of a fare and wasted his own time.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.